I had the occasion to listen a few minutes to the presenter who was correctly talking about opportunities in the AFCFTA and opportunities that are presented by the AFCFTA from an investment point of view. And let me underscore the point that he was making, and I did not hear all that the presenter said, but what I did hear is absolutely correct. First, we have to invest in digital infrastructure for implementation of the AFCFTA. This is not just a traditional trade agreement. In my view, this is the last opportunity for Africa to lift ourselves by our bootstraps in every way that we can, whether in digital platforms, in customs procedures, in trade facilitation. We have to make sure that this agreement delivers more than just efficient transit of goods from one border to the other. We have to make sure that the agreement positions our continent for the fourth industrial revolution, leveraging on the fact that we have no legacy challenges in respect of technologies and digital systems. So we are now working very closely with AfreximBank to ensure that we deliver an AFCFTA that is digitally ready and an AFCFTA that responds to Africa's digital aspirations. In the area of payments, for example, in the area of payments, we are working together as the AFCFTA Secretariat. Our contribution is providing the legal framework for the establishment of a Pan-African payments and settlement system. AfreximBank, as a partner, is providing liquidity of close to $1 billion United States dollars to make sure that we build the infrastructure, the technology, and that we have the liquidity for the settlement that will be done in the context of this digital platform, this payment system for Africa. As we all know, today, we have on our continent over 42 currencies. If you want to trade with somebody in just next door in Cote d'Ivoire, where I am, you have to convert the dollar, rather convert the cedi into the United States dollar. Your counterparty in Cote d'Ivoire or in Togo will receive the United States dollar. They then will have to convert the dollar to the CFA franc. So you can imagine throughout the African continent, when trading happens across our borders, this is the cost to trade efficiency, affordability of trade, and access to trade facilities. It costs Africa close to $5 billion United States dollars annually. This condition that we have been in for the last 60 years, the cost of currency convertibility is a very, very significant constraint to boosting intra-Africa trade. And so we have partnered with Afreximbank to make sure that we address this particular question of the cost of currency convertibility and how it constrains trade on the African continent. If we don't address this question, we will not be able to double intra-Africa trade by the year 2035, because it is exorbitant to trade between West Africa and East Africa, or Central Africa and Southern Africa, and so on. And so we believe that this payments settlement system will be a significant contributor to, and one of the tools of implementation of the AFCFTA, and that is absolutely critical. This is one way in which the AFCFTA is different from any other trade negotiation or any other trade agreement that we have here on our African continent. We are not going to foreclose anybody else from investing in this platform. However, we have agreed with AfreximBank, and we've said this to our heads of states, that the investors in this payments, Pan-African payments and settlement system, those who invest must be African. There must be African entities, they must be African institutional investors, because we want this system to be African. We want it to be run by Africans. We want it to be for the benefit of Africa. For too long, our continent has relied on third currencies in relation to our own payments in the African continent. It is time that we reduce this over-reliance on third country currencies when we are conducting our own trade as a continent. If you trade between Egypt and Nigeria, the transfer of funds can take up to 2 to 3 weeks, because first the funds have to be diverted to a foreign correspondent bank in another part of the world. This leads to inefficiency, and this leads to our small medium enterprises that are trading in the continent being rendered completely uncompetitive. And so we want to address that through the Pan-African payments and settlement system. The second area that is critical is which we are also investing a lot of energy in, and will be inviting private sector investments. And that's why your conference today is relevant. Not only are we going to invite private sector investment for the payments and settlement, the Pan-African payments and settlement system, but we're also going to invite private sector investment for the next area that I will just set out to you, and that is on digital systems for customs procedures. In some countries, in some regions, it can take 12 to 15 days for you to get what we call a certificate of origin, which is a verification that the goods were produced in the country in which you are claiming that they were produced. Between the time that you request or that you apply for a certificate of origin to when you receive it, it is 13, 14, sometimes 15 days later. Again, this is a cost to Africa's economy. This is a cost to Africa's efficiency of trade and the ability to be efficient and competitive is very, very severely, in a negative way, affected by the lack of coherent customs procedures. And I'm just mentioning this issue of certificates of origin as an example. And so we are looking to develop digital platforms, a single window, digital single window for customs procedures, so that all countries that are state parties to the AFCFTA can be able to switch onto a common digital platform for customs procedures, for verification of rules of origin, and all of these interrelated aspects of customs procedures. You may be aware that we have already started this conversation with all of Africa's heads of customs authorities. We have invited them to Accra. We have met with them this year 3 or 4 times, discussing how we can accelerate implementation of the AFCFTA using digital platforms that the AFCFTA Secretariat will put at the disposal of all state parties to the agreement establishing the AFCFTA. And so this is a very important step, because it enables us to leapfrog in terms of customs procedures and digital technologies, efficiency, and transit of goods. The good news is this: we will not be starting from scratch. We know that there are regions on the African continent that have succeeded in introducing models for customs procedures, for transit of goods that are digitally based. The East African community, for example, has had immense success in using digital tools, in reducing transit times of goods from one country in the East African community to another. And so we are looking to improve on some of the existing models that have been already introduced on the African continent. This will take a partnership between the private sector and the public sector and the Secretariat. And in this regard, we have already we are already in communication with commercial banks to interest commercial banks to invest in border efficiency, invest in hard and soft infrastructure along our borders so that we can have a truly public-private partnership for management of borders leading to efficiency. Already, there is, again, I want to point to a model in this regard. We know that in Bight Bridge, between South Africa and Zimbabwe, there has been over $70 million investment of commercial banks into the management and the technology and the systems running of that border, a syndicated investment led by Afrexim Bank and other commercial banks such as Absa Bank and so on. So there are ways in which the AFCFTA can move beyond just being a trade agreement for governments. We must make sure that we make the space for private sector investment that can facilitate acceleration of implementation of the AFCFTA. And these digital tools are just two examples that I've just mentioned where there are investment opportunities. The third area that is equally important, in my opinion, is as we develop regional value chains, as we develop continental value chains for enhancing Africa's productive capacity, there again, we see opportunities for not only, which is important, not only investing in much needed recapitalization in those value chains, for example, in the area of cotton, to make the cotton producing countries more competitive. But when we entice and encourage investment in these value chains, we will be creating jobs for young Africans and also for small, medium enterprises, particularly small, medium enterprises that are led by women. We have already identified 4 value chains that we conducted a study over a period of 5 months: automotive sector, agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, fisheries products. These are some of the value chains that we want to focus on, and we want to work with investors to make sure that we have productive investment in these sectors to enable competitiveness for trading under the AFCFTA. I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Today, Malawi is one of the largest exporters of raw tobacco leaves in the world. Malawi wants to transition, not to rely anymore on the export of raw tobacco, but on the manufacturing of related technologies. Not the export of tobacco, but related technologies. Zimbabwe is similarly situated, is also a large exporter of raw tobacco. How can we work together in the context of the AFCFTA to make sure that we encourage investment in the technologies that are required to enable this sector in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, to transform and to make a contribution to Africa's industrialization? Of course, the link is the AFCFTA. That's the legal framework that will enable all of that to happen. Leather processing, for example. How do we make sure that countries that produce leather are able to have the required technology for production of leather that becomes part of the component of vehicles that are exported from Kenya, from Morocco, from South Africa, from Ghana, it is very important that we think very, very strategically about how we are going to create these value chains and enable small, medium enterprises to be part of these value chains in the export and the intra-African trade of value-added production. And so you and I have a lot of work to do. There are many who doubt that we will be able to pull this off. There are many who say that Africa will not be able to do this. But we know that, we as Africans know that, as I've said before, this is Africa's last opportunity to have a truly integrated market, and Africa's last opportunity to leverage on this population of 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion United States dollars. I don't believe that we will have another opportunity again to make sure that our continent is more competitive and more integrated than it has been for the last 60 years. And so I look forward to our partnership and collaboration as we implement the AFCFTA. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. We know that. The point I make to Europeans all the time is that it took you 72 years, precisely 72 years, to reach this level and this depth of market integration. Don't expect that Africa will be able to integrate the market in less than 2 years, in less than 5 years. It's going to take a very, very long time, but we've taken a very, very critical and a very important first step towards a truly integrated market so that we position our continent for competitiveness. There's no reason why Africa cannot be as competitive as India, as competitive as China, with similar populations. But obviously, we have a lot of work to do to catch up to India and to catch up to China. But we know from the success of China, we know that it is possible. We simply have to work hard and to be determined to achieve the objective of an integrated market and an integrated economy in Africa. Once again, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish you very, very successful deliberations. Thank you.